Good evening and welcome to Startups Powered by AI. Before we begin, I would like to understand the room a little bit better. We're going to do this through a hands-up approach. Please raise your hand if you've used an AI tool in the past. A fair majority of the room. Now please raise your hand if you're building or maybe you've considered building a startup in this room. Very interesting. And would any of you like to work in a startup, perhaps? A vast majority. That's really interesting, actually, because this is catered to you guys, and it's lovely to have that sort of split and enthusiasm amongst the audience. Over the last year, AI has made building dramatically easier. Small teams can now prototype, test, and launch faster than ever. But tonight is not about how easy it is to build. It's about something harder. If everyone has access to the same models and tools, where does the real advantage come in? Because the barriers to entry has collapsed, but the barrier to building something that lasts has not. I'm joined by three amazing guests here who are very different, but come in here from very deeply connected angles. I'm joined by Joanna Yu, who sits on the investment side, where the question is not, can this be built? But does this hold up over time? I'm joined by Anoop George, who operates at the intersection of AI, commercial execution, and human behavior, deploying systems where outcomes actually matter. And Manish Chawal, who works closest to where ideas begin and see where they fail to translate into something real. Before we begin, we'll have one more hands-up approach. If you had to bet on one thing that matters the most in an AI startup, I'd like you to raise your hand here. Who believes team is the most important in an AI startup? Who believes the tech is most important? Who believes it's distribution? Now, you may want to remember this answer, because it might change by the end of the evening. AI has made it easier than ever to build something that looks impressive. Typically, a startup begins with an idea, followed by building a prototype, something early users and investors can see and interact with. In AI startups, this is often a model demo. These demos can look polished and convincing and can suggest early traction or depth, meaning signs that people might actually use or value the product. But what is less clear is whether that thing is actually a company, something that creates real value for users and can last over time. So the question is simple: what is still hard to fake? Joanna, in venture capital, people often talk about signals, which are indicators that a startup is worth backing. Has speed become overrated as a signal? If everyone can build quickly now, what does speed actually tell you today?
That's a great opening, Gia. So I think this is an interesting nuance that we're addressing. People often think, or there is a hype around building a $1 billion startup in probably 24 months with 2 FTEs. But reality is speeding itself perhaps is not the measure. And in fact, if you think I can build a startup too fast, the contrary to that is it is often low barrier to entry or easy to build. And I think a similar concept, perhaps this is closer to the truth, is traction. So rather than saying speed, we often think about traction from users. And that translates into the usage metrics. So from months 1 since this customer onboarded to months 5, has usage doubled through whatever metrics that is? And that's often one that we religiously track. Usage data, by cohort or sometimes dollar value. That is, are these users paying more per month over time, which is often the number one quality metrics when it comes to customer. It's as simple as customer retention. So I think that is perhaps the signal that we track. It tells us how happy they are. It tells us whether there is product market fit in that particular segment. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. How interesting. So it's traction over speed, really. Anu, when you're building early, before you have users or traction, how do you decide what's worth building?
I think the first part of that answer is easy because most startups start because the founders have a sense of a problem that they want to solve. So it's a belief system that gets you started. But that'll only take you maybe the first month. One of the things that we do in our business is you have to build for behavior, not belief. Behavior as in user behavior. To her point, Joanna's point, what did they click? Why did they click that? Why did they not use this? How often are they using it? Once you begin to approximate behavior really well, it becomes industrial. You can predict that if I get somebody sign up today, they would spend XYZ dollars in 24 hours. I think that's really what matters. So belief is great, gets you started, but you got to figure out user behavior very, very quickly.
How interesting. So it's important to have that user behavior to consider traction over the speed overall. Absolutely. Anisha, from a user or builder perspective, how do you tell the difference between something that looks impressive and something people actually keep using? And have you ever seen cases where something looks exciting early on but didn't hold up?
Yeah, so this has happened a couple of times actually. It happens way more often than you'd think. So it is really, really easy to make something look impressive. There might be a beautiful person who can speak confidently, who can speak articulately, but the product is just ugly. And that happens really, really often. So one example would be, we had a guy come in about 2-3 weeks ago, and he said that he wanted, his brother-in-law gifted him a Japanese teapot, which was beautiful. Now the only problem was that he didn't drink tea, so he doesn't need the teapot. And he would have preferred cash or a gift card. And now the problem was that he would prefer cash or a gift card, right? And for that, he came up with a solution of building an app where he would put in gift cards and store them online on his phone. And that sounded beautiful. That was like, wow, you have such a good start. He told me the story about the Japanese teapot, which I would be very lucky to receive if I could. But it was just not a product that is feasible, right? So with the noise around AI, with so many people wanting to do something in this field just because everyone else is doing it, it doesn't make sense if it's something that isn't feasible, right? So I guess it's just the feasibility research that has to be done. So I hope that answers your question.
Could you expand a bit more on the feasibility research?
100%. So just because a product solves your problem, or just because it's something that you personally face, doesn't mean it solves the entire market's problem, doesn't mean it's something that you have to put out in the market, doesn't mean it's something which people would buy, right? And I'm sure Johanna's smiling because she understands. It's the investment part of it. Who would invest in a product that they don't need, right? So that is the feasibility I'm talking about. It's just the market research. It's just something that makes sense instead of just looking good.
Wow, that's really interesting. Because I do understand. I think a lot of startups early on, they really are trying to just find a solution to a problem. And normally it's a problem that they face a lot. It's often, they reach the demo stage, and when the users come in, they realize, oh, do people actually want this? Are they actually going to use this? Well, we don't really know until you actually face the users. We'll now do another hands-up approach. If you think strong AI performance alone is enough to build a successful product, I'd like you to raise your hand. Very quiet room. Now, keep your hand up or raise your hand if you think choosing the right problem and reaching out to the users matters more. I'm glad we've influenced you. I'd like to now take a question from Slido.
So there's a question for all three of you guys. If you had
How interesting. Of course.
I'd probably start with a problem and then figure whether AI has a role to play. I think that's probably the most sanest way to think about it. Otherwise, you can't just retrofit AI into, we can fit it everywhere, but you've got to find a problem worth solving and then see what tech was really needed for it.
That's an easy one for a founder. So I think I would concur. I would probably choose a problem that I know the best, and I would test if I know the problem better than 80% of the population, which places me, in a good stance in building, and that's probably something related to what I do day to day or what I've seen or witnessed, how I grew up. Yeah, but it's quite generic. There's a reason why I'm not building.
Personally, a field I'd probably go in is something that I've been told by my Indian parents and other family members. It's the cooking field, where you can find recipes online, but rather they'd want a video to be made by AI, which is happening nowadays. There's deep fakes and everything else. Rather put that into a positive sense and make a deep fake of maybe a recipe. Maybe that might help my cooking.
Really interesting, actually. Because currently, well, if you don't have a lot of cooking ability, you're going to go onto YouTube, you're going to try and follow a recipe, which isn't always catered to the ingredients you have on hand. I've actually used ChatGPT to alter a tiramisu recipe based on the limited ingredients I have in my household. So I totally understand the appeal of having a deepfake video of like a cooking process. I think I definitely rely on that. I don't have a lot of cooking ability.
Can I just add one more to the question, just so that I answer that question?
Oh, for sure.
I'd make a distinction between the current use of AI, which is all LLM based, from the traditional AI models. So if you had to answer that question directly, I would probably think about problems that cannot be solved by humans today. Research around medicine, vaccinations, climate, energy, logistics, they require help from machines. So if you had to answer that question, I'd probably pick a deep tech problem where you cannot solve it with the traditional model. So AI is a great fit. And there maybe you could lead with AI and say, I'm going to build a deep learning network for XYZ to solve this particular problem. That's probably the only exception I'd make.
Absolutely. I feel like a lot of startups are, and we'll get into this in the following segments about AI wrappers, but a lot of AI startups, they don't really need AI. However, since it's what's being implemented a lot in every form of startup, there's this maybe push to use AI even if it's not needed in that specific problem or that specific startup. Getting into our defensibility segment now. Here is the tension. AI is becoming more powerful, more accessible at the same time. That lowers barriers to entry, but makes long-term advantage hard to sustain. In venture capital, investors often talk about a moat. What is a moat? It's something that makes a company hard to compete with or replace. But if founders cannot rely on the model itself to create that moat, what can they rely on? Joanna, when you assess whether a company has a real moat, what do you actually look for?
I think I'll add the caveat that no moat is forever. You often, now these days, especially thinking short, medium to long term, given disintermediation risk, what is defensible? So there's probably there are four sort of areas in terms of defensibility that's emerging in investment landscape at the moment, and I'll probably go through them quickly, but reality is it's never black and white, and it's always you have to test the strengths and you really have to know the market, do your research. So the first and probably the most commonly addressed one is data moats. So what is data moats? Having a large amount of data that's publicly available is not a moat. It is one where everyone can access. So true data moat is proprietary, it's exclusive, it is it's unstructured, hard to clean, hard to synthesize or understand. That to us is data moat, and what builds that often is very robust legal agreements with your users that allows you to use the data and enhance your model over time. And that brings me to the second one, sort of that flows onto data mode, is true network effect. Just using data as an example, if your data is compounding over time, addressing a problem and it's self-enhancing over time with your model, whether it's you having very deep expertise building linkage, mapping in terms of your data infrastructure, that in itself creates network effect that over time, probably we think about the medium term, it's less likely to get disintermediated. Now, the third area we often think about is probably the switching cost, and switching cost comes in all forms, and there are many pathways to get there. The probably two common ones in we've seen enterprise especially is integrations. So think of zero of the world where it is literally painful for any organizations to implement, and implementation cycle takes probably 6 months on. And now for the enterprise to do it again, the risk is low. It's not unlikely. AI can probably help migration happen faster, but we're talking the medium term, that's less likely. And equally, I would also think with switching cost, the embeddedness in terms of workflows. If an organization, a lot of users are using this product every day, that you have so many usage data point and metrics and entering points to prove that, you know, this organization cannot live without. And we would define that as high switching cost. The fourth is probably anything to do with regulatory compliances as barriers, and that often applies to industry that requires, for example, FDA approvals or licensing when it comes to payment rails. Those are probably the industry that's low on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to being intermediated. I heard distribution, and that's an interesting one. So I think we're placing more emphasis on founder, on distribution, ultimately on trust, because human ultimately is an irreplaceable part of the value chain, and that when it comes to traditional compliance-heavy, regulatory-heavy industries, it's particularly relevant. So that's a laundry list.
No, that is a very detailed answer. I did not know about all of that, but it does make sense when you listen to it. Sorry, we seem to have an audience question.
Question for Joanna. On your second point, could you clarify what you meant by network effects?
So think of data, how data compounds over time. So I have 100 users using mine. I don't know, this AI agent, but at the same time, if I have agreements exclusively collecting their user behaviors, their inputs, outputs over time, and I use data to train my model, and model obviously self-enhances and gets better over time, and that is a feedback loop that just continues to spiral, and that's what I define as network effect. Facebook is the traditional SaaS sense of network effect. It's the idea that social groups are self-referencing, so my friends are using it, therefore I'm using it, and then that multiplies. That's probably the traditional sense, but it comes in all shapes and forms, really. Yeah.
Yes, Pratham.
Sorry, just on the last point for the question, you mentioned that founder trust is incredibly important when it comes to considering regulatory compliance. Could you expand on that point and how those two intersect?
Yeah, so I have a current investment in a compliance-heavy industry, very deep, boring industry. If you do research, it's mining. Mining industry is incredibly self-referencing. It is the idea that if you can sell to a site in a certain mining region, and if you have deep expertise, you know the distribution network, you know literally the VP quality or compliance officer of the fund, and you speak the same language, or you attend the same events, they know you've worked in that industry for a long time prior to building this startup. That's what we call trust and distribution. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joanna. Now, following on from that, Anu, where do small teams actually find leverage against competitors with more resources? And from your experience, how do you navigate that imbalance in practice?
It's a fun one. It's something that keeps me and my team awake, and I'm pretty sure all founders up awake. I think the thing that makes us, or rather the smallness of a startup, is actually its strength. And I'll talk about two things and maybe an example. The ability of a startup to focus is incredibly powerful. To create alignment within the team is incredibly easy. And tracking execution. Large companies struggle with focus, alignment, and execution. So if you have to compete, you have to go deep in a particular problem with this mindset of focus, alignment, and execution. I think that eventually beats out your larger competitors. And I've seen that play out multiple times. I'll give you a simple example, and I won't use my business. I'll talk about the three big LLMs in the world. You have OpenAI, you have Claude, and you have Gemini. Grok and all the others are in history at the moment. Have you thought about why these three, even though they are big, they call themselves startups, they're so big, they're still able to compete? And this is my take, okay? I think OpenAI has lost its way because they are become a masters of everything. Sorry, generalists in some sense. They do everything under the sun. Claude and I guess OpenAI were neck to neck for a very long time. But what Claude did really well is they decided that their primary focus is on the enterprise. And I'm going to get enterprise users, get my results the very first time. So single shot right is their focus. If you go to Claude and use it and say, I want to do a project plan, chances are that 9 out of 10 times, with a single prompt, you will get a really good plan. OpenAI will take you 10 or 12 tries. So that's the difference between them. So they've made a conscious choice somewhere in the top, decided that this is what I need to do. At their size, they were able to pull away. How is Gemini different from the other two? Their biggest asset was search. So if you need real grounded research, topical, you cannot beat them. So all of them eventually have figured, I think OpenAI is still trying to figure out what they need to do. But I think in some sense, Claude and Gemini have figured that this is where their moat is at the moment. It's not that they won't, nobody else will catch up, but that ability to focus on one problem, create alignment really quickly, and track the execution, the hell out of that execution, really, really matters. I think that's really what startups do really well. Otherwise, you will have sleepless nights. Every day there's a new feature coming. You'll be like, okay, when is my product roadmap going out of the window? But I think the answer is this, in my view.
Absolutely. I think Claude has really differentiated itself recently. There's been a lot of market feedback, really positive around Claude usage. I've heard good things about it, even in the legal field. Not heavy reliance on it, but it has been quite useful in differentiating itself recently.
They're also victims of their success. They have started to now meter usage. Even though if you pay for it, you still can't use it.
Oh, yeah?
They have limits, right? And they have a 2-hour rolling limit. They have because there are a lot more people migrating from OpenAI. So you didn't think about the eventuality that people will come and I will, it's funny.
Should I not consider stress testing for the wider
I don't think they would have assumed 100 million people switching overnight.
Yes.
Can I just ask a question? It might be for both you and Joanna. Joanna, you mentioned earlier that one of the key signals that you look for is whether users will pay more over time and how that's become a key metric. So how does then that align with what you just said, Anu, about Claude becoming victims of their own success and that they can't actually keep up with how much demand there is from users? And how do you ensure that long-term value when you are just starting out?
I think you're probably better placed.
The thing about value is, the moment you get real value, you will put up with pain because you're not getting it anywhere else. For me, as a business, what we get out of the Claude model, we don't get it out of OpenAI. So even if they have stuff going in the back end, I'm happy to bear to a reasonable degree. So you will not lose customers if you really deliver value. That's my short answer. They will fix it. It's a scale problem. They'll spend a few more billion, buy more data centers and all of that. They'll fix it. But I don't think they're going to lose too many users because they couldn't get their act together. But you have to deliver value. That's my point. People are so passionate about it, they'll put up with a little bit of bullshit. It's okay.
If I understood it correctly, so Claude recently, this is actually going to be my last point, which is what's often underestimated. I'm jumping my gun a little. is a pricing power in this market. It's your user love it so much that they put up with a price increase. I'm sure there are a lot of commerce students in this room. It's price elasticity versus inelasticity. So the idea that Claude recently shifted its pricing model from pure subscription, that is like $20 a month to $20 a month, excluding tokens, and you have to pay usage. It's a whole entire unpredictability regarding pricing. It's the fact that we still staying on this platform that makes it truly unique. It's what I call pricing power, and that is incredibly important in a market where there's a lot of usage-based token consumption processing power associated with the product.
Absolutely. I feel like there's definitely a lot of loyalty to LLMs. Everyone seems to have a preference and a go-to, and they really do end up sticking to it. So I'm curious, out of the room, how many here prefer Claude? Okay. How many here prefer OpenAI? A little taller. A little taller. No shame at all. Well, how about Gemini? Who here really likes Gemini? Nice. I think Gemini has this feature, which I think I've been relying on it a little bit more, is where it's like teach yourself, where it doesn't give you the output straight away, and it tries to work you through with these analogies. Now, sometimes I really like those analogies, but sometimes I can lose patience, and I end up going to my default LLM, which at the moment is OpenAI. But I've heard such great things about Claude. I really need to give Claude a shot, really. But it's lovely to see that split, with the majority leaning towards Claude. We're now going to go into our Beyond the API section. A lot of AI products look convincing at the demo stage. However, real product quality only begins after that stage, when real users start relying on it in everyday situations, and we've touched upon this briefly. That's when reliability, speed, cost, and edge really start to matter. So the question becomes, how far can a startup really go by building on top of these existing AI tools? Joanna, there's been a lot of discussion about these so-called AI wrappers, which are products built on top of existing models. Do you think these can become real, lasting companies, or is there a ceiling to that approach?
I think with AI wrappers, there's probably two death traps associated with it. The first is what we call unit economics death traps, and that's the idea that as you scale, you have more users, your variable cost goes exponential because you're simply relying on LLM. What does LLM do? You consume tokens. So as a result, in contrast, if you think about traditional SaaS, the reason why there are so many software investors like myself is your fixed cost gets spread over time with number of users, right? So that is what's attractive with software. If that advantage no longer stands and your variable cost is ballooning over time, that sort of unit economics, just the math doesn't work. That's probably the desperate number one. The second is you don't want to just build a feature. You want to build a product or ideally a platform. With a lot of the wrappers at the moment, it's a very thin feature that is at the risk of platform, right? So you think about the history of LLMs where at one point, and this is actually not too distant history, there were heaps of PDF readers. They call themselves AI. It's basically OCR. Overnight, the value has been wiped because you can just upload PDF on ChatGPT, and that's probably, I would say, 12 months ago. We've seen PDF AI that had 100 mil valuation plus evaporate. So that's definitely a risk. Now, having said that, I think that's not to say all AI wrappers will die. It's more so you have to, again, test yourself against all of the modes. Do you have a data mode? Is there switching cost? Is the barrier to entry high given regulatory compliance? And are you deep in the domain expertise that nobody else can build and they trust you? Simple as that.
Absolutely. These days, there's a lot of workflows that you can build with no code, no code. And have that API and that LLM layer there. And you can almost create these AI wrappers. You don't require a lot of technical skill for it. But it's important to take a lot of factors into consideration, just like Joanna's pointed out. Yes?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. For the audience member just joining us, please scan the QR code to send any questions through Slido so that we can convey the questions to the guests. So over to you.
Of course. Sorry, that's on my part. I should have introduced it at the very start, but I was just too excited to get into the podcast. I skipped over it. But yes, please scan the QR code and input questions, and those are the Slido questions that have been coming through. There will be a section where we'll take a lot more direct questions and we'll open it up to the floor. That section is coming up if you have those burning questions. Anu, do you agree with, like, from a founder's perspective to what Joanna has just said? And more broadly, what do founders usually underestimate when turning these kinds of products into something that actually works in practice?
I sort of completely agree with Joanna in terms of her assessment. It also depends what product you're building. If you're building for an enterprise, their requirements are fundamentally different from what a consumer-focused product is doing. If you're talking to enterprises, trust, security, reliability, all the things that are boring, they just bump up. Just to get through an enterprise contract will take you 6 months for a large organization. They would do audits after audit, they need certification. So all of the boring things that LLMs can't do or AI can't do, you still need to factor. But on the other hand, when it comes to consumer, privacy and trust, fundamentally critical. Reliability, yeah, to some extent, yes, but trust and privacy. So most of the wrappers, I think, are good as a proof of concept. It will scale to some extent, but eventually you have to find a way to bring your unit economics down. You can't just wrap, and every time somebody asks a question, your costs go up, you add a margin, and eventually you'll get the question, why can't ChatGPT do this? You won't have an answer, and they will eventually find a better way to do it. So I think for founders, I think thinking about your, what type of business you're running, the core hasn't changed, which is security, trust. And the last thing I'd like to, sort of add to this is LLMs are notoriously probabilistic. You ask the same question twice, you get two different answers. You need, in an enterprise setting or in a consumer setting, you need answers to be deterministic. If I have a certain problem, user A and user B must see similar things if the context is the same. You can't have two different answers. I can guarantee no founder can tell you how to fix that particular problem unless you bring your wisdom, you train it differently, you incorporate a lot of other techniques to make it deterministic. Imagine if an insurance company was to settle a claim and two people the same claim got two different answers. They'd knock you over the head with it. So that's fundamentally problematic. So it's all good from a concept, but I think once you start thinking about a business, you've got to change your mindset. It's okay to show a proof of concept, I think.
I think absolutely. When you sort of start off and you don't have a lot of users going on, it's really more of a demo, more of a proof of concept. I think AI wrappers are a great place to sort of start off. But as those users come on board, it's important for your startup to evolve as the users start interacting with it. Because you're right, the cost associated with these AI wrappers is really high early on.
I also feel remiss if I didn't mention that it's so easy to get caught up in the wrapper business. But if you have to stand up your own environment, provision a GPU on the cloud and do training, you will find that you can swipe a credit card on a wrapper, but you can't swipe a credit card on provisioning environments. It's incredibly expensive and complicated.
Could you expand a little bit on that?
All right. Say somebody has an idea today, and the idea might be, I want an app that generates podcast questions. You can create a beautiful screen, you can do all of that, and you get that thing done, right? And you want to get started, you can swipe your credit card, you can buy $100 worth of tokens, and you can go and do it. Get a $13 subscription from Lovable, create an app. Now, let's assume that it takes off. Now you realize that you got to do a little more hard work. You can't keep depending on it because your costs are going up and people are not paying on time or whatever. you decide that you want to provision your environment. Conservatively, if you had to just create a simple, NVIDIA, whatever, G, whatever, provisioning on the environment, it's $3,000 runtime for a month, base level. You have to pay upfront. And the speed on that, and the response time on that is terrible. You will type and you'll wait for it to generate an answer. Customers expect milliseconds, so you need to scale. So without even, moving the needle a lot, you will start burning cash. And where did that cash come from?
It's true, startups don't have a lot of cash to burn.
So you got to be...
Ideally, a lot of startups want to really invest that towards marketing or really getting those users on board and putting their name out there.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Not that I have a startup. I'd like to have one. Maybe. I'd like to do another raise your hand approach. If you think a strong demo usually translates into a strong product, I'd like you to raise your hand. Does a strong demo mean a strong product? Raise your hand if you think most demos fall apart under real usage. Shaf there. Seems like you raise your hand from experience.
I mean, this is not really related to startups, but think back to every hackathon, right? You do your pitch in front of the judges, everything looks good in terms of the video, but if you actually use the product, it's sometimes not working.
I think that's common with tech as a whole. You have this idea of this is how it's going to turn out, it's great, and then put it out there and it's not quite like it. But I think that's just the way it is. We'll now move on to our execution segment. This is where many startups fail. Not at the idea, not at the model, but at the execution inside real systems. Once deployed, the challenge shifts towards trust, monitoring, workflow integration, and whether people actually rely on it day to day. And when founders try to put AI into real workflows, what are the hardest decisions they have to get right early?
I think the key is to figure out your customer profile or user persona really well. A day in the life of whomever you are trying to, help. And it has to be incredibly detailed. And you've got to understand literally what they do every single day from the time they get into work, or if it's off work, then off work. And you will find that the devil's in the details. And if it's an enterprise, you really need to then build a lot of integrations into enterprise systems. And that is incredibly tough because of the same reasons that I talked about: privacy, data security. No enterprise is going to open up their systems if you don't. So the hardest stuff is really to get your user persona really right. And what do they do? And where can you add disproportionate value? And that's tough.
And so that, of course, is following on from what Hanish had mentioned around a lot of that research that needs to go on very early on.
And I think it's okay to not have a product that's 100% automated in the first instance, especially in MVP. You will end up with, 60% of the functionality is the product. The remaining 40% is still human. You have to spend time with them to understand. And most people think, or most founders that I speak to think that you can automate the hell out of it. So you can build a product that's functional upfront. It never works because you want the face time with your users. That's gold. Just by throwing a product out and thinking that will do the magic, I think you're going for a surprise. I would much rather get an hour of time of my user every day for 3 months than not have and learn based on what they do. It's very tough.
So would you say a lot of that user feedback and then those user interactions early on are really what's key?
100%. They'll pick small things. Why? I want this upload button somewhere else, for example. Or I wish you could send this to my email, for example. You may never have thought about that in the ideation phase. So you get to know all of these small things that will make immense, value to the end user. But for you, you would never have even thought of those things. I think those ones are really gold. Once you embed it, it's incredibly tough to extract it out. Once it becomes a way of working, it's tough to take it out.
So going back to the idea of user personas and finding out where you can bring value to the user, what are some types of interactions that are the best way to find that out? Like you mentioned, obviously talking to the user directly. I think that's like one of the ones that people tend towards initially. There's also stuff like A/B testing. So when should each of those be used, and are there any other less common methods to find out important details about your users?
I think it's a combination of things depending on what stage of the business you are in. You can definitely do user research even before building a product to know how people use it, all of that. If you've got a product working like an MVP, you spend time with the user, sit with them, through Teams meeting or Zoom meeting and say, how do you do this? Can I watch you do it? Record it, go back home, figure it out. I would recommend that even if you are doing an MVP, build product analytics into it. So there are tools that track user behavior on the app, what they clicked, how long they were on a page. So basic product telemetry data. So you can then replay that and see how they navigated to a particular menu option or function. So there are many ways, and I would probably take a bit of everything and start. So I wouldn't just go with one method, because you need to cover majority of people that probably use it. And not every user behaves the same way. Different companies have different ways of doing it. So you would try a multitude of techniques, but these are the most common: user research, interviews, live role plays, and then product telemetry.
Okay, so would you say it's harder to build that product, to build that tech, or do you think it's harder to actually get the users on board from a startup perspective? What do you think is hard?
Get users on board.
Get users on board.
The tech is easy. Whatever I talked about, you can build all of this in 2 days. Everything is available. The product telemetry, user, everything is available as a service. You just need to know which stack will work for you. And that's the easiest thing to do. You've built all of this thing, but how do you get the first person to sign up and try and do this? That's tough. And it's like manufacturing a car. There are 5 steps in this. There's awareness. So how do you create awareness for this product that you've built? That awareness must translate into interest to try out. That interest must then translate to a commitment to buy. Once you've bought it, you want engagement. That engagement then becomes loyalty. So if you look at it, it's essentially a funnel. And you've got to track all of this. How do you get this engine moving? And once you've done it, you can go to folks like Joanna and say, I got this method fixed. I need $1 million. Because that's what they're interested in. Is it predictable? And do you have figured it out?
Just a question on that for Ganesha. How have you seen young founders go about fixing that particular issue, like reaching out to potential customers or users and getting that feedback and actually getting them on board?
Yeah, no. So, wow, I haven't spoken in a hot minute, but I'd actually just want to build on what Anoop said. And again, so the tech part of it, the back end part of it is actually really easy, but then getting users is just where marketing kind of comes in. Now, here's where a lot of startups actually used AI. So the winner of last year's PFC, the Peter Farrell Cup, actually used AI to be generating their marketing. And now you might think that it might go in the wrong sense, as in they might not be able to generate too many users out of it. But having a good prompt, so like engineering the right prompt, putting that in Claude, literally coded them the entire app that they used for their AI marketing thing. And I was going to get on it a little bit later, but I'll just tell you guys now. So it just went really, really well. So they got 100K in funding. And the revenue that they generated was, trust me, way more than that. So I think all of that really just depends on your marketing. Now, if you put your heads into it, now if you all come together and think like a happy family, you might not be able to get too much out of it, especially when you have AI to do the thinking for you. But again, it just depends on your prompt, right? So you engineer the right prompt, and you'll have AI doing all of it for you. Yeah.
That's so exciting and so interesting. AI running the entire marketing, and they were successful in it too.
They will.
Perhaps that's what we need to start considering. Maybe we need to have more AI running our marketing campaigns. Maybe even for the society. No, I'm joking. Yes. actually, Alicia, following on from that, when you're looking at student founders and early stage teams, what separates people who actually ship something from those who stay stuck in these ideas?
Right. So before I answer that, let me just ask everybody a question. How many of us use AI to do our assignment directly? It's okay, and you can be honest.
As in just using the entire output as is?
As in drafting the final output of your assignment. No, just a draft. As in just taking inspiration or just like helping you for the final draft. A couple of us. Actually, a lot of us, most of us, anyways. And how many of us use AI to actually help through thinking us through the output? Or as in just helping us. Wow, I see most of you changing your answers. Anyways, what I'm trying to get at is student founders who actually ship something and founders who aren't able to and they just get stuck. It's just the fact that most of them use AI to generate the final pitch, the final code, so many of them use Claude Code. How many of us use Claude Code? Yeah, that's what I thought. But most of them use AI to generate the final product-ish, and then they just put 2 sentences of their own and, oh, it's my product. That's unfortunately not how it works if you really want to ship something, right? There's just that perfect amount of AI that you need to use, and then the perfect amount of craziness that you put in from your side, and that perfect amount of passion that you have behind that project, which really helps you ship it out. So that's one. And the second is the entire process, right? So some of them just get stuck at ideation. And even after the ideation, even after the entire MVP is built, even after you have a prototype, oh, maybe this idea isn't for us. It's just the overthinking. It's just when they're going through the ideation process, they don't think it through to the very T, right? To the very period. And that is something that doesn't help them ship it out. Because at the end of the day, they pitch the idea, they're obviously not passionate about it, they don't get funding, and then they get disappointed and sit down. That's not how it works. That's
very interesting because I do understand that. I mean, as a founder, you really want what you're putting out there to be successful. You want it to be successful. And so I understand that bit of overthinking, that second guessing yourself. Is this the idea? Is it my idea? Is this going to make it? I think most startups, they start off with what they want, and then they end up changing what users want along the way. And that's just the nature of startups. And to kind of answer on your question previously that you addressed the audience, maybe back when I first sort of used OpenAI for the first few times, I had done an assignment that was purely an AI output. An OpenAI output. I didn't score the best, and I learned from that, and I was like, oof, I don't think I can rely on it to just give me an output and just go with it. I think it's something I need to refine, and it's great for the idea creation process and planning process, but I can't follow the output as it is, because LLMs come with their shortcomings, of course. We're now on to our Ask the Expert questions. This is a very exciting segment where we will now open it up to the floor to ask questions to the audience directly. If you have any of those burning questions. Does the audience have any questions they can hold you on to?
There are a few questions on slide.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So one of the questions is, do you think most AI startups today will still exist in 5 years?
Oh no!
Are we taking bets on it?
I suppose I'll take that one. I think.
A lot more data. Companies that have closed.
I think, if anything, I feel like they churn faster. It's not I think historically the software, look at startups, the graduation rate is probably 90% failure, so 10% graduation. And that's traditional SaaS. I think AI companies may fail faster given the innovation speed is actually faster. So there are a lot more new entrants that, instantly kills market for you. having said that, I do want to raise a point. I think just in terms like that innovation cycle, we're probably living through one of the innovation cycle of our lifetime. You guys are younger, you probably leave another way, but I probably won't. So I think that's not a reason not to innovate. I think the economy relies on innovations, and especially Australia. So I do later stage investments, meaning Series B and beyond. And there are a lot of pre-seed, meaning pre-revenue businesses. Just by sheer volumes, the one that eventually funnels to me in Australia is nothing comparable to my US peers in terms of volume. So that speaks a lot to us as an economy. It's the idea that we're still conservative, we're not investing in technology, and we're afraid of failing. So I don't think that's a reason not to start. Yeah.
Sure. I think I was having a conversation with somebody about this exact topic, and I think it's more about the tangibility of AI now it's intangible, of course. You can't feel ChatGPT, can you? But I think it's just where the future of the world is heading. Who knows, maybe in the next 5 years we might have holograms come in, and we already do have some demos up in the US. And I think it's just, as long as, building on what Joanna said, as long as the USP is solved, as long as there is a good problem that they are solving, as long as it's reasonable, I'm sure that it will survive and actually even thrive.
This is purely my take, and I'll draw a parallel from human behavior. If you think about listen to what all of the larger players are talking about, they're talking about AGI but if you cut through the clutter, what are they trying to do? If you look at humans, what makes us human is three things, I think, and it's based in science: how we feel, how we think, and how we act. To some extent, we are trying to build AI systems that today can definitely, in some way or the other, think. They can definitely act, as in write things and control things, because we've given them permission. I think the last barrier is really feel. We don't know if they feel. At some stage, I'm sure they will begin to feel something, not in the way we do, right? So to answer the question of whether today's crop of AI will survive, my personal take is that most of them will die because the models are changing so fast. What I think will survive is companies that invest in deep tech, in a specific problem, build expertise down. The AGI systems don't need to be experts in everything else. They do a lot of good things reasonably well, but some things need to be done really well with zero margin for error and high degree of predictability. So those companies 100% will survive. The current crop of large enterprises like Canva and the others that incorporate them, I think definitely they will continue to grow and they'll probably dominate. But the new crop, I think, are companies that have specific models that are deep. Because that's the only way you will differentiate. But foundationally, I think it'll begin to become more like I said, think, feel, and act. They will get there.
Absolutely. So maybe specialization is the one in really owning it. Absolutely. We'll take one more question from Slido before progressing.
Okay, so there's a question for Joanna. What's your outlook on Australian startups, for example, Kinso? What trends should founders know that venture capitalists or investment firms care about?
Sorry, I didn't get the example. Was that Canva that you gave? It's an example. So you said example of Australia. Oh.
Example was Kinso.
Okay. So I think we're speaking generally about Australian startups. So to think about the problem, Australian investors, the reason why we think this market's attractive and continue to be is we as an economy still breeds a lot of tech innovations. We have Canva, Employment Heroes, and unicorns and like. They start here. We're not short of talent in a way. And once they build a product, there is true potential in expanding to the US. And through that, that's where the true growth sort of multiple holds for investing in Australia per se. And on Australian investors, sort of in terms of risk appetite, we are incredibly disciplined when it comes to valuations as well. So we're not sort of the US venture capitalist that's simply, playing the power law, throwing random multiples at a startup, hoping for the best. I throw 100 bets, hoping one of them is an all-fund returner. So that's probably going both ways. There are talents, they're disciplined growth, and they have huge growth potential ahead of them should they proceed to overseas. But at the same time, the investors are disciplined in the economy. Also, from another lens, in terms of liquidity and fundings, Australia as an economy, we do have a lot of liquidity and will continue to be that way, whether it's through super funds or whether it's through the stability of the economy, that we attract a lot of overseas investors at investing in this economy and thereby investing in innovations. So I think this breeds sort of a good environment for a lot of founders.
So the founder of Kinzo, Frank Grief, I actually had a conversation with him in February when he came into UNSW. And I asked him that, how are you planning to have, what is your revenue model? I mean, of course, it's a pay-as-you-go type business, but how are you trying to relate to Gen Z? Because we're taking over the world now, as we should, but it's just, we're heading into corporate now. How are we going to use Kinzo as a business? And yeah, the entire idea of it, it speaks to us, but how will we get to know about it? And he told me that they have a current wait list of over 10,000 or 12,000 businesses or just individual customers waiting to be using Kinzo. And they told me that they had this marketing technique or this marketing thing that they had where they brought in interns from over Australia, over the world. There was someone who flew in from UK, and they converted their entire Instagram feed into this office type make or something, and it was really nice, right? So for now, I think the biggest advice that even the startups that I've worked with say is just marketing, right? Like, regardless of what your product is, how beautiful or ugly or bad or sad it is, honestly, it's just the marketing. The way you market your product can change everything for you. Yes.
Sorry, can I take that point, that answer, and throw it back to Joanna? From an investor perspective, how important is marketing, especially at the early stage?
I speak from experience. Marketing, which translates to me as sales efficiency, is a very important metric. That is, per dollar spent of marketing, is it yielding per dollar new ARR? Can you retain that over time? Or another way, if you Google, it's quite technical. It's basically another metric that measures cost of acquiring a customer, meaning all marketing, whether I throw some freebies at you, free trials, the ratio of a cost of acquiring user against lifetime value of a customer, that is how much you spend, how long I can retain you. So those are the single most important metrics that indicates, can you scale? Are you spending at the right sort of marketing strategy channel? And then is that yielding an ROI that makes sense? Now, I think one of my prep question, I don't know if we'll cover it, is what are AI startups overlooking at the moment in this economy? And that is very simple, disciplined growth. If you're burning so much money for that $1 of new AR that you can't retain, that speaks to me that you're not growing. You won't go very far. Yeah.
Get into, which is the looking forward section. We spent most of the night talking about what works, but we're now going to have a focus on what's ahead of us. And as Joanna just went into, which is, in the current landscape, what founders are underestimating over the next few years, and that is discipline.
Yeah, disciplined growth, yeah.
Discipline growth. Anu, what behavior or mindset do founders consistently get wrong when building their AI?
That everything is possible with AI.
Everything's possible.
It's not. I think that's probably the number one thing. I mean, it's easy in the first instance to visualize how the current crop of AI can do it, and it may do a semi-decent job, but everything cannot be done. And I think that's really the thing that they get wrong. There are a lot of use cases, but not all of them can be dealt with it. Even internal businesses, right? Processes that depend on it. You still need humans a lot more than we think. And that's probably one.
Absolutely. There's a lot of hype around, the use of AI, and you really understand how it's truly applicable to your problem and your solution once you start interacting with it. The more you interact with it, the more you realize its shortcomings and where it fits into the bigger picture.
Founders must be experts in the problem that they solve to some extent. If you're not, then you're going to be clueless. You got to hold your ground somewhere, because customers will come at you from all the places. I want this, I want that. But somewhere you got to know whatever is it that you're trying to solve to a reasonable degree. So I think if they spend time learning the problem, understanding all of the nuances, I think it's a better use of time than trying more and more concepts.
Absolutely, I think founders should really know their problem really well, and I definitely agree with that. Otherwise, it's kind of like you're walking blindfolded.
Like one of the things that I've seen, or maybe in my own experience, is it's very easy or relatively easy to get a meeting with a customer in an enterprise setting if you say you are a founder. Because somehow people think they know better or they know more. Then you've got to live that hype. You know what I mean? So your personal credibility matters a lot. So it's trust that, I guess, in some sense.
So it's the trust that you need to establish early on with the users as well.
It's you.
It's you. It's you, and it's your idea. It's your solution.
Yeah, it's not an AI that's doing funny things. It's you, end of the day.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things that we've addressed today is that the human element is very much there, and that we can't just use the output of an AI as is, or have AI running the show. It's very much directed by the human element. Anisha, as someone who's close to early stage founders, what excites you the most about where AI startups are heading?
I shouldn't be sitting next to Anoop while answering this question. But I think 10 out of 10 of the finalists of one of the programs that Founders is running, 10 out of the 10 finalists are all AI backed. Either let it be AI as an extension, AI as a plugin, as an add-on, or as something as simple as just generating their UX, maybe just Canva. But they're all AI backed. And I think the reason the 11th startup was not able to come to the top 10 was only because everything that they did was handmade.
Oh no.
And everything that they did was they literally put their blood, sweat, and tears into it. Don't do that.
Oh no.
When you have the option of AI, use it wisely, use it efficiently, and just don't put your hard work into rather getting an output that you could rather prompt AI to put in. So, you'd avoid the bias, you'd avoid everything that AI does, and just get a better output than you could generate, right? Yes. I think I'm really excited about that part. I'm excited to see AI working together with startups, obviously for the better, for the world, and for the greater good. Just excited about that.
Absolutely. I think the founders do need to be working with AI. It's not just AI, it's not just founders, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
That's really where the sweet spot is. As many of you chose at the start, what mattered the most? Was it team or tech or distribution? It'd be interesting to see if maybe you've changed on your opinions from where you were at the very start. What tonight shows is that none of these work in isolation. AI has made building faster and intelligence accessible, but advantage is still earned. Teams that win will not be the ones with the best demos, but the ones that understand where AI fits, what users trust, and what compounds. Because when intelligence becomes cheap, judgment is the real mode. Thank you everyone for coming to our second episode. It's Startups Powered by AI. We now have an informal networking opportunity if you guys would like.